we have to tell the best television show that we can, but we also know that the whole point of telling The Last of Us as a television show is to honor The Last of Us. If you lose sight of that, then, you know, yes, you will be properly screamed at. Casting Abby was an interesting challenge. I mean, for starters, we knew from the game that she had this tremendous physical presence. She's a very strong woman, physically strong. And one of the things I talked about with Neil early on was why. I love to ask pesky questions. Why did you do that? Why did you do this? Why did you do this? And he said something really interesting and I hadn't considered because I don't make games, I just play them. And he said, when you divide gameplay between two characters, you need them to have different gameplay styles. Well, Ellie, we already knew from The Last of Us Part 1, had a different playstyle from Joel. She was stealthy, she was quick, she was sneaky. So how do we differentiate between Ellie and Abby from playstyle? We make Abby much more physically imposing. She can run in there and just start swinging. But for the television show, that's not a factor. We don't have gameplay issues like that. So we kind of opened it up to say, look, let's just look for somebody that has the spirit of Abby, has the heart and the mind, and let's see where the physicality goes. And we always begin with our casting director, Mary Vernew, who makes these brilliant lists that are they're very tantalizing, because you, just like everybody sits, well, it could be this, it could be this. But Kaitlyn just jumped right out to us, in part because she had this great history with The Last of Us and Neil Druckmann. She was, many years ago, going to play Ellie in the movie version of The Last of Us when she was obviously much younger and she could play a 14-year-old. So she was part of the family in a weird way. She's a huge fan of the games. She plays them with her dad. It's like, and Kaitlyn Dever is just a tremendous actor. There's some actors, not only who are never bad, but who are always good, always. And Kaitlyn is one of them. And there's a ferocity there, and also a humility and a decency. And Abby's complicated. We want to believe when she does these horrible things. We want to believe when she does violent things. But we also need to feel connected to her. We need to understand her. She needs to somehow get us on her side, even though we're not on her side. And Kaitlyn just seemed like the perfect person. And yeah, we got it right. I gotta say, we got that one right.
What's inside?
People.
What's outside?
Part of the challenge is picking a source material that you think will be properly adaptable. There are some games where there really isn't a way to adapt them to television or film without breaking them. It's very difficult to transfer, for instance, the gameplay experience, or in situations where games don't really have a strong central character because it's really you, it requires a lot of invention. The folks who made Fallout did a brilliant job in that circumstance, where they created a character and they gave her a story that fit into that world. But for us, we didn't have that problem because The Last of Us is just, I don't know how to put it other than to say it's highly adaptable. That's not to say it's easily adaptable, but it should transfer over somewhat easily. But what I get to do as a fan is say, okay, we have extra space, we have extra room to tell story because we aren't doing gameplay. So where can we go? What can we do? And also, here are things as a fan I would be so sad about if they weren't brought over as they were in the game. So I get the benefit of Neil Druckmann, who created the game. He's never gonna let me break anything. And interestingly, I would say most of the time, I'm the one saying, or what if we did it exactly the way it was in the game? There are those things, but Neil's great about giving me the freedom to muck about and to adjust and adapt and evolve things where I think it would make for a better show.
The Last of Us Part 3 might happen, might never happen.
The video game Last of Us Part 3, yeah.
So Neil Druckmann, at one point there was a documentary, Grounded Part 2,
yes,
which was put out, where he mentions if it doesn't happen, he's happy with Part 1 and Part 2, the through line that he created there.
Yeah.
But he did say if he had a story and a concept, he would do a part 3. He has a concept, but not a story. Do you know that concept?
I do not. I am familiar with some of the concepts that Neil's kicked around as potential third games, but I don't know if he's zeroed in on one of them. I don't know what will happen there. I hope that there's a Last of Us Part 3, but also then sometimes I think, well, maybe you should just be happy. Don't be sad it's over, be happy that it happened at all. Because I think that Naughty Dog is an incredible game studio. They make beautiful art, and their ability to convey what we can do in television through animation is pretty remarkable. And I kind of think like, well, I could beg Neil to make a third Last of Us game, but also, what would be the other games that they would do? And I don't want to rob myself of those, so I'm torn. Not that it matters. It's not like what I want is going to matter. They will do what they do. All I know is I'll be there. I'll be there on day 1 to play Intergalactic. I'll be there on day 1 to play. If there's another Uncharted, I'll play it. If there's another Last of Us, I'll play it. If there's another, whatever they come up with, Jack and Dexter, I'll play it.
Has it been adapted yet? I don't think it has.
It has not been. I'm sure I think they're adapting everything now.
You swore.
Well, we know the script pretty well. I will constantly refer back to transcripts because there is actually a physical script that they have. It's enormous, and a lot of it ultimately is stuff that didn't make it into the game, so it's a bit unwieldy to go through that. So I tend to rely on transcripts that people have made, which is really helpful, and of course my own memory. And I will play through again before we sit down and start working on it. So I've got quite a bit of replay through of The Last of Us Part 2 to do yet again. It's obviously I know all the things that happen, but there are these little moments that sometimes I'm like, ooh, this feeling I have, or this little tiny visual. But then we sit and talk, and we start with the biggest questions. What do we think this is about? What are we really imagining is the fundamental point of this movement, of this opera? And then as we answer the big questions, we start to then answer the sub-big questions, and the ones under that, and the ones under that, and it just keeps progressing down to tiny details. So much of what we try and figure out is, where are we going to begin? Where are we going to end? Where do we hit pause before another season begins? And now inside of that, where do we want all the little mini beginnings and endings that create episodes? When it comes to influences, they're all in my head because I've watched them, but I don't draw on any of them specifically when I'm trying to do anything, whether it was Chernobyl or The Last of Us, because I want to get as inside this story as I can. But I know as I'm getting inside of this story, there's just subconsciously all these things I've picked up along the way that I've learned in terms of tone and pacing and vibe. If there's one thing that really did impact me for this adaptation, it was probably Chernobyl, because I learned so much doing that, and I learned so much watching Johan Renck and the way he directed and the way he used multiple cameras, handheld cameras, and grounding everything as much as possible, which for me and Neil made so much sense to do for The Last of Us, because it has fantasy elements to it, or science fiction elements, and the more we could ground those in reality and science, the truer they would feel visually and instinctively. Is why we began the series with a scientist talking on a talk show about the science.